Dear students, in this lecture we are going to discuss lumped flow routing, and this would constitute our module 7. Now, so far in up to module 6 we get to know about precipitation, we get to know about hydrographs, but in both these cases we were either dealing with assumption of uniformity. That means if precipitation is happening over a watershed, we assume that this is going to be uniform throughout particular catchment. And when we were talking about hydrographs, we were always interested in one specific point. Now that one specific point could be here somewhere at intermediate location within a bigger watershed which will have its own catchment. And if we are exactly at mouth of that watershed, it will encompass all the catchments that constitute that watershed. Now, when we were talking about these kind of hydrographs, essentially we were looking into variation of discharge, where discharge was on y-axis and on x-axis we had time, and we were trying to understand how this discharge varies with respect to time. On the other hand, when we talk about the routing problem, we are essentially saying that there is a drop of water which started its journey from the farthest most point into a watershed, for example, and as it is moving forward, the we want to trace that what is going to be the discharge per unit time. That means if this water, if we have observed a hydrograph like this at point 1, then we are interested that how it will have its journey all the way till point 2. It may look something like this, or it may have even more flattened base and lower peak and so on. So all these possibilities are there, and to solve that problem we look into the problem of routing. Now sometimes we are specifically interested in to understand that how floods propagate, and this flood propagation becomes the problem of flood routing. But essentially concepts are going to remain same, that in broad sense we are essentially talking about the flow routing, and that cause could be just flood or an hydrograph that is forming in a routine manner there. Now when we talk about the two systems to do this routing, we could have a lumped system and we could have the distributed system. If you recall from our module 1, when we were talking about lumped systems, we were essentially saying that for entire catchment or for entire watershed, we will have some representative values. That means we are not very much interested to learn about variation in space, but we are interested to learn about variation in time. And hydrograph is a perfect example of this lumped representation of a system, that we take this big catchment at the end. We are saying that this is how the hydrograph looks like, and we are just interested into understanding this formation of hydrograph at one particular time. So variation of QT with respect to time. On the other hand, in some cases, we want to know that how a particular phenomena is varying both in space and time. So if we say that x-axis is time, y-axis is space, and each of these location represent discrete space time unit, and we are interested to look at the values at these smaller grids or much finer resolution in comparison to what we were just doing in the lumped system, and we say that it becomes a distributed modeling. And somewhere between the lumped and distributed modeling we have the semi-distributed models that are not as simplistic as lumped systems and neither as complex as the distributed system. Now you can very well imagine that whenever we go to distributed system, the computations that we have to do, the amount of physics that we have to deal with, and sometimes the amount of data that we have to deal with is going to be huge. On the other hand, lumped systems are often have limited complexity, but they give us fairer amount of insights at relatively simpler capacity. So in this module, which is our module 7, we are going to focus on understanding what this lumped flow routing is, and then in next module we'll talk about the distributed flow routing. So when we talk about the governing equation of lumped flow routing, so it finds its origin into the most simplistic form of continuity equation, where we write ds by dt is equal to it minus qt, where I is inflow, Q is outflow, and ds by dt is change in storage with respect to time. And our idea is to simply relate that if there is some change in storage happening in any hydrological system, and that hydrological system could be a reservoir, it could be a long canal or channel in which flood is entering from this side and leaving from here, and in between this inlet and outlet some change in storage is happening. Similarly, here we have some input, we have some discharge output, and because of this storage there is some change in storage with respect to time that is happening, which is going to alter the relationship between inflow and outflow. And as you can imagine, if this ds by dt is not equal to 0, that means a particular system is changing with respect to time, and hence we say that it's a time variant or unsteady system. Now we will focus on this equation and try to understand how we can solve it in fairly simple manner by using a lot of observations that we would eventually collect. Now in this equation we would always have the understanding of IT. It is basically inflow hydrograph, and using unit hydrograph theory and relating that unit hydrographs to precipitation hydrographs, we would always have understanding of inflow hydrographs. There are two unknowns here. We don't know how our outflow is going to look like, and we don't know that what change in storage is going to look like. So but one thing is for sure, that we can always relate this, we can always have a second relationship and say that the storage itself, it could be just function of discharge that is happening, or it can be function of inflow also. It can also depend upon higher order derivatives, d square I dt square, and this story goes on. So here we are saying is that although we do not know the exact value of S, if we somehow come up with the functional form that how this S or storage depends on the physical parameters of discharge and inflow, we should be able to plug this equation here and reduce these two unknown equation to one unknown equation and solve this differential equation by various methods and get to our answer. And that is where our interest lies, that what is the functional form we assume. So we talked about the linear reservoir problem, and in linear reservoir problem we said that S is just function of Q, and specifically in a linear reservoir S is directly proportional to Q, and we removed this constant proportionality constant with K, and we said that S is equal to KQ. And as soon as we said that, our problem of IT minus QT, it becomes equal to D upon dt KQ. And then when we talked about the non-linear reservoirs, we can say that unlike linear reservoirs where S is directly proportional to Q, S is simply function of Q, and all other terms I, di, dt, d square, I, dt square, they are ignored, because we are making a simplistic assumption that our storage just depends upon Q, but that variation could be non-linear. And so you see that instead of just making a highly simplistic assumption, we are going more toward realism, and this assumption that this could be any linear non-linear function of discharge, that is storage is function of Q, this gives rise to a method called as level pool routing. And this would be our first method that we would look into reservoir routing problems, that we will assume that our reservoir is leveled. That means that the water level is uniform throughout and hence named level pool routing, but we do not assume any functional relationship to be linear between storage and discharge. Now, with this understanding, to model that how this S and Q are related, we would also look into that how this storage and discharge varies first. Only then we would be able to establish this relationship. So let us say that on x-axis we have storage, and on y-axis we have discharge. So our intuition says that as the storage increases, and assuming that there is an opening or penstoke or pipe at base of this reservoir, we can clearly say intuitively that as storage is increasing, our discharge is going to increase. And if we talk about a point where we have maximum amount of discharge, we should say that it should occur at the maximum storage. So corresponding to each storage, we have a unique value of discharge, and such relationships where a unique relationship between discharge and storage exists, we call such flows as invariable flows. However, in real world, sometimes we observe something of form that looks like hysteresis. That means when a reservoir is filling up, the relationship between discharge and storage, so again we have storage here and we have discharge here, is different. So now reservoir is filling up, and if this reservoir is really long, shallow, and uh, has a significant backwater effect. So if we have a dam here, we see that water profiles are usually not straight. There is some backwater effect, that is water keeps on rising backwards, or it could have another profiles, and we'll talk about these profiles when we go to our discussion on hydraulics. But you have a variable storage discharge relationships. That essentially means that for same storage, you could have two different values of discharge. And these kind of problems give rise to in variable flow problems or variable discharge storage relationships. And we will study these kind of systems when we go to dynamic wave routing. But when we are talking about lumped models, we typically assume that this relationship between discharge and storage is invariable, and even if such kind of backwater effect exists, we take some mean or median line here and say that this relation can be best approximated despite existing of this hysteresis kind of loop by the red line that I'm showing as an averaged out phenomenon. Now, with this understanding, let us try to understand that how this level pool routing would be done. Again, going back to our equation, we can say that for level pool routing, we can write ds by dt as inflow at any time t minus outflow at any time t. If we know the measure of storage at time index j and or j plus 1 and at any other time previous time step j, we can say that for small enough of difference between time index j plus 1 and j, we can write this equation from continuum into discrete form. Also, we know the variation of it, and if we are talking about two discrete intervals j and j plus 1, we can clearly say that for very small interval, the best representative value of I at any time t is basically average of ij and average of ij plus 1, assuming that these variations are small and not sporadic. So we say that this is ij plus ij plus 1 divided by 2. And similarly, if we know the variation of q with respect to time, we can again apply the same rationale what we apply to it and say that this is qj plus 1 divided by 2. That would mean that if we bring all the terms of qj plus 1 and sj plus 1 on one side, we can write this equation as 2sj plus 1 divided by delta t plus qj plus 1, and this should be equal to ij plus 1 plus 2sj delta t minus qj. Now, the reason I have done this is that because, as I said, this precipitation or inflow hydrograph would always be known to us. So I is always known. We know that at previous time step with respect to j plus 1, what is our storage? Delta t is the time interval or discrete time interval at which we are taking observations, and similarly outflow at previous time is known. So when we talk about first time index, that is j equal to 1, that would mean we need to know q1, we need to know I1, we need to know I2, and we need to know S2, S1, if we are talking about the right hand side of this equation. Now, knowing this S1 and Q1 is essentially specifying the initial conditions. That is, what is the initial storage at S1 and Q1. And again, we are not concerned about I1 or I2 at any time because we have the values of these inflows at any time period t. Now, so the question remains that if we are able to tell everything about the right hand side, there are two unknowns into left hand side. We don't know what is Sj plus 1 and we don't know what Qj plus 1 is. To address this, we look into two relationships here. If you recall, we already talked about in some of the lectures that we can always, for a given section of river or given section of reservoir, we always have, in most cases, we have these discharge stage relationships. That is, if we have discharge here and we are measuring what is the height of water or water surface elevation, which is typically referred to as stage when we are talking about channels, or just water surface elevation if we are talking about reservoirs. By collecting lot of data or making measurements at site, we can establish some relationships between storage outflow and stage. Similarly, if we have the understanding of topography, if we know that what is shape of our reservoir, we can also establish relationship between stage and not stage, storage and water surface elevation. So if we tell you that this is height of the water and this is shape of the reservoir, it is very easy to calculate how much water is stored, and we can relate it to height of water, or stage, that I must say, or what we are saying as elevation. Now, since we have two x-axes that represent the same quantity, which is stage, on y-axis we have outflow and on another axis we have storage. That means that combining these two curves, we can determine the relationship between our storage and discharge. If we can determine relationship between storage and discharge, and if I divide it by some constant delta t, I can easily determine what is the relationship between S delta upon delta t and Q. And if we can also add the same value here. So in first case, let us say that this was our relationship between S and Q. Then I divided it by some constant which is lesser than 1. So I will have more pronounced values. So I say that if I know S versus Q, I can easily plot S upon delta T with respect to Q. And for a given S delta T, I already know Q. So I can also plot a third relationship, which would be a relationship between S delta T plus Q and Q. So in a sense, all these three curves are derived relationships, because we came to S and Q by looking at relationship between storage stage and discharge versus stage. So this curve can be known. And the reason we are making it little complicated here is that because if you see our right hand side and left hand side, these are the quantities of interest for us. If we know that what is the value of 2s delta t plus q, corresponding to that, we can establish what is the value of discharge that we are going to observe. And even on right hand side, the unknowns are in form of s delta t minus q. So that is the reason we are going from two observed relationships to a derived relationship, and its application will become clear as soon as we talk about an example. So now if we know the value at any sj plus 1, qj plus 1, and ultimately we are interested to look into just qj plus 1, we can start from here. We can go here and say that this is the discharge that would happen for this value of the composite quantity of Sj plus 1 divided by delta T plus Qj plus 1. Also, let us say that our Sj plus 1 delta T plus Qj plus 1 is known to us. It is some value constant in at particular iteration. So what we can do, and also there was one more 2 here. So if Sj plus 1 is known, that means 2Sj plus 1 is also known. So if I subtract the Qj plus 1 minus twice of Qj plus 1, I can write it as C minus 2 Qj plus 1, which implies I can write 2 times Sj plus 1 upon delta T minus Qj as C minus 2Qj. That essentially means that again, if I go to my right hand side, here I was interested to determine 2Sj plus 1 delta T plus Qj plus 1. And once I know that, and I know the value of discharge at previous time step, I can easily determine all the quantities on the right hand side of this equation, and my calculations can progress iteratively until I reach the end of the time step for which I am developing a hydrograph. So without further ado, let us discuss an example and bring concreteness to this concept. So here the question is that we have a reservoir for detaining flood flows in 1 acre of land, and area has been already been normalized, which is good. And it has vertical sides. So that means that if it has a vertical sides, we don't have to worry about the top profile, and we can say that it's a level reservoir routing problem. It has a 5 feet diameter penstock. Penstocks refer to very large diameter pipes which are placed somewhere at bottom of these reservoirs. So if we have inflow here, this would facilitate the discharge queue. And we have some information available between stage discharge and storage head. So we will try to look into those relationships, and ultimate task is to determine that given an inflow hydrograph, how our outflow hydrograph is going to look like. So let us look at what other information is available to us. So here in this case, we know the relationship between elevation and discharge, and we also know the relationship between elevation and storage. So this information is given to us. Also, what we know is that what is the relationship between, or what is the inflow hydrograph, and that is at time 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on. We know the values in cubic feet per second as 0, 60, 120, 180, and so on. And we have also discretized these time intervals in form of indices all the way from 1 to 22. So basically, we also know that delta T corresponds to 10 minutes here, which is equal to 600 seconds. So this information is also known to us. So here question is, given this I at any time t, we have to determine what is the q at any time t given all the relationships that are available to us. So again, going by our governing equation, and furthermore, unless specified, we can assume that initial conditions are known to us, that is at t equal to 0 we know, or at j equal to 1 we can assume that our reservoir is empty, so S1 is equal to 0, and at S, if S1 is equal to 0, discharge Q1 equal to 0. So now what we can do is we can write our governing equation that at j equal to 1, we have on left hand side that 2S2 divided by delta T plus Q2 is equal to I1 plus I2 plus 2 times S1 divided by delta T minus Q1. So I know I1, I know I2. I have to worry about this term. And once I know this thing, I can entirely determine my right hand side. So at I1, we have 0 inflow, because if you look at time 0 or index 1, inflow is equal to 0. At j equal to 2, or at first second time instant, we know our inflow is equal to 60. So we can write the value as 60 here. When we talk about S1, S1 corresponding to J1 is equal to 0 again. So we will write here 0 because this comes from our boundary conditions. As I said, S1 equal to 0 here. Delta T we already assumed to be 10 minutes, which is 600. And our Q1 is equal to 0 again, because if reservoir is empty, that means the storage discharge relationship would not exist, and hence we can put this value as 0. So our first relationship comes out to be 2st2 delta T plus Q2 is equal to 60. So now if you look at this 2s2 delta T plus Q2 equal to 60, and we also know that if we go to this table, we know S, we know Q, we know delta T. So we can create another column which uses the table of HQS. So let me copy paste it from here. We can create another column which has the value of 2s delta t plus q. So in first column or in first row, this is of course going to be 0 because s is 0, t is 0, q is 0. In second column, we can write 2 into 21780 divided by 600 because time was delta t is in minutes and everything is in seconds, plus q, which in this case is equal to 3, and this comes out to be value of 76. So we can fill up these values as we are saying that if we know qs, we can easily calculate 2s delta t plus q. But now we know that when 2s delta t plus q is equal to 60, our discharge is equal to 0. If 2s delta t plus q is equal to 76, our discharge is equal to 3 units. And if we go here, we need to determine if our 2st plus q2 is equal to 60, what is the value of our q2? And it simply becomes an interpolation problem where we say that we can determine the value at any intermediate point as q equal to 0 plus 3 minus 0 divided by 76 minus 0 into 60 minus 0. I'm not doing anything special, but I'm just doing a linear interpolation. And this value, of course, would be somewhere between 0 and 3, much closer to 3, as we are asking for value at 60 and value at 76 is known. So value of Q2 comes out to be 2.36 cubic feet per second. Similarly, we can progress ahead, and I will show one more iteration that what happens at j equal to 2. So at j equal to 2, our left hand side becomes 2s3 delta t plus q3, and this is equal to I2 plus I3 plus 2s2 delta t minus q2. And as I said, we know 2s2 delta t plus q2 was equal to 60 as we calculated in previous case. We also know that in this case our q2 was equal to 2.36 as we calculated towards the end. So here we can go from this equation and say that let us subtract 2 times q2 from both sides. So this becomes 60 minus 2q2 or 60 minus 2 times 2.36, and we end up with the value of something around 55.2 here. The reason we are doing this calculation is that because we need to know what is the value of 2s2 delta t minus q2. We will simply plug it here now as 55.2. I2 and I3 are known to us from our tables. I2 is 60, I3 is 120. So it becomes 60 plus 120 again. And we say that this is just 60 plus 120 plus 55.2. And hence we can write that 2s3 delta t plus q3 is equal to 235.2. Now again, we know the value of 2s3 delta t plus q3, but we are just interested in q3. Again, we go back to our table and we see that we have these values as 158 corresponding to storage of 43,000. For storage of 65,000, we have the value of 235. Now, when the value of 2s delta t plus q is equal to 235, our discharge is 17 cubic feet per second. If our value of 2s delta t plus q is 158, our discharge is 8. So if we have value somewhere between 255, that means we also need the next value. This comes out to be 320. So the value of discharge for any value of 255 would be somewhere between 8 and 17, but closer to the value corresponding to the 2s delta t plus q of 235. So again we will apply the same interpolation, that is to determine the value at 235.2 we would say that not, in fact, it's 235.2, and we readily have this available because we know that at 235 our discharge is 17. So we can simply say that our discharge in this case is 17 CFS. So we determined Q1 as 0. We knew I1 was 0. We determined Q2 as 3 CFS when we knew our I2 was equal to 60 CFS. We determined Q3 as 17 CFS when you knew our I3 was 120 CFS, and we will keep on doing this calculation iteratively, either using Excel or any programming language of your choice, or even using pen and paper, because these are just 22 rows or columns that you have to compute. We would have our inflow hydrograph, which is given to us, and based on the calculations you can easily plot your outflow hydrograph, and the difference in magnitude of peak thus observed is called as the attenuation of peak. And when we talk about change in origin, we say that this corresponds to time of translation plus time of distribution, and together they tell us what is the time of flood movement. So this is what how we apply a concept of I minus Q delta equal to ds by dt to do a flood routing through a reservoir. In our next video, we'll talk about similar routing problem, but in the context of channel sections using Muskingum method. Thank you.